Three, two, one. I'm John Miglosh for the Wisconsin DMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. Well, we got a lot of news today. The trouble is I get sucked into the news feed and I find all kinds of things I'd like to talk about, and then I forget about the important things. And that is the trouble with news on the internet, and we're going to talk about that in a little more depth today. First of all, India has proposed regulations that would require the source of a message to be traceable. And WhatsApp has made a big deal for about a year or maybe more about how they'd use end-to-end encryption, which means even they can't unscramble what you're sending, which we kind of like. My whole family is committed to WhatsApp instead of Twitter. I like it. Anyway, but what that means is that WhatsApp may be illegal in India, which is an interesting concept when you think about it. So I'm trying to see if there's any comments. Okay. So I just want to pass that along. You know, what if, and there's 200 million users. So, I mean, they might want to be careful about that because they have a lot of fans in India. Just an FYI on how government can try to regulate after the horse is out of the corral. All of a sudden we had a lot of legislation on fax machines back in the 90s, I would suppose. I actually created software that would let me broadcast fax dung 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 over and over. I sent one out on Christmas Eve about like midnight. Merry Christmas to all. And sadly, some people had their fax machines on, which I didn't expect. And I think Ernie Shell got one in the middle of the night. But the point is that all these broadcast faxes got banned, and my fax machine doesn't necessarily even print out the paper. It saves it, shows it to me. I don't ever have to look at it if I don't want to, and never have to print it. But the logic was that the paper cost was borne by the user, unlike junk phone calls. So now we get infinite junk phone calls and no broadcast faxes, where they would be easier to deal with, I think, than crappy, your car warranty is expired, or this is the IRS, right? They don't call much. Anyway, so let's pop that one. Snopes quits the Facebook fact-checking program. It turns out that there's a lot of problems with fact-checking. I heard this morning on a regular news show that the president had gotten 2 Pinocchios because he said 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted in their caravan to the border, and the real answer is 31%. So he got fact-checked as another lie by the president, which just shows you part of the problem with fact-checking, right? If you dig deep enough, there's always a refinement where you can be a little off. I would easily say 31% and 1 in 3 is pretty close to identical myself. But if you don't, if you want to keep chronicling lies by someone, then that is one. But if all he did was quote those kinds of statistics, no one would understand what he was talking about, which is another fact. So anyway, it can't deal with sarcasm, it can't deal with jokes, and I'm thinking that there ought to be some kind of crowdsourced fake news deal, but then it becomes a vote. The problem is that nobody has a sense of humor anymore. I don't have a solution, but there should be a way to get normal people involved in this to vote. Kind of like on that, what images in here have a car? I have a lot of trouble with those. Don't see as well as I used to. But if you show it to enough people and you think everybody's getting it wrong, but everybody's getting it the same, well, then you have the answer. And somebody made a fortune when they first started putting words up that were tough to OCR in literature, in old books, and they would put them up there, and enough people would say, this is what we think it looks like, that they would then fix the OCR text. I don't know if you knew that, but that's another idea for Facebook. Instead of Snopes, forget about Snopes. Snopes has too much of an agenda. Okay. Are Scan and Go stores the future of retail? Cashless stores have a great potential. And the answer was, what kind of stores would you like? And groceries was the by far and away number one. It has to be something with a regular, repeated frequency. Otherwise, I'm not going to let you have my identity just to make it a little quicker. I think also fast food might be at one of these that they didn't ask about that, where we had a scan and go. So that was an interesting idea, and they said that younger people preferred it, although I think older people would prefer it because those checkout yourself lanes are really a mess. Consumer theft, that's one of the big problems. I knew somebody that was down on their luck in 2008 and would take, like, let's say almonds in a bag, and then when they got to the cashier thing, the checkout yourself, they would say they were peanuts at about a third of the price. The scale didn't know any different. It charged them the price per pound for peanuts instead of cashews or almonds or whatever good nuts they were. And that's a big problem, right? That is a big problem. Okay, so, and in a world where we may all be taken over by robots, there'll be plenty of people to hire to smile and say good day, which is another issue in itself that we're going to delve into a little bit of what should we do to preserve our brand. But that one didn't. It was a great article in Ad Age India, but Ad Age India blocks my ability to mark up their articles, and so then I forget what I'm going to say. Anyway, so that's a good story. Okay, now this is the one I wanted to talk about today. This is the one, how digital media killed itself. Okay, Carolyn McCarthy, and I'm going to send this over to Carolyn. And she got a job in the late 2000s. The late 2000s. No, the late. That would be like 2090 if you were in my generation. The late 20th century is the 1990s. Anyway, but never mind. She's gotten out of journalism. Anyway, but I was around. I remember working with Prime Media. And I worked with several other titles. I got a call from Boston Consulting one time, or McKinsey and Company, I forget. And they said, we have 700 titles we've acquired. And it was, venture funded and all that. They said, we've surveyed them all to see if they understand their subscriber base and what their characteristics are. And only one did, and that was InFisherman. And they said, and we said, how is it that someone in Brainerd, Minnesota understands their subscribers when none of the titles from New York City do? And the people at InFisherman said, there's this guy in Milwaukee, and he's basically figured it out. So anyway, they bought up all these titles, and they wanted me to bid on a database. And I wrote them back along. I think I was competing with Epsilon. But it was one of these venture-funded big deals where they globbed it all together and thought that would give them infinite data, which ultimately made their publications more valuable. It doesn't. So I declined to bid on it. I said, you're going to just destroy them all. And they went under about a year and a half later. So that's basically the message of this. But what happens is that in an effort to increase advertising revenues, we want to increase subscribers. And when you increase subscribers, you have to water down your content, or some might say make it more broad. You can call it whatever you will, but I'll call it that. And as you expand the number of subscribers and water down your content to try to keep everybody happy, you lose the reason why you were published in the first place. And so Caroline explains this step of how there should be 10 publishers, but now there's 70. They're fighting everybody within each other, and that's why there were the brutal layoffs. And she now works in advertising. Good for you. I hope you do some creative stuff. She blames clickbait and even more so the contract of irrelevance, which I thought was excellent. We have to be really careful, and then getting the latest woke millennial opinion pieces. We've got to be careful, like this thing that I'm doing every day. We throw in Aristotle and Plato. We throw in, yesterday was Karl Marx. We throw in things to give you a unique perspective on the news. Definitely a unique perspective. So she says, those of us on the business side shouldn't hesitate to tell our editorial colleagues how we operate and about making money and about what matters. And that's what I do for you every day. It's the world's only daily live marketing news show. Share, tell your friends.